You have to find a way as an individual to make that time. Take those breaks for yourself. Your leadership team is not pushing it on you. Better work, I think, does have a component of this is I need to show up. I need to feel motivated. I need to have some passion. I need to go home with some level of accomplishment. Like these things have to happen with some kind of regularity, because if I dread going to work and I just got to go right back at it tomorrow, except I've got to double down because I feel like I'm falling behind, eventually there's no formula for better work in that kind of a model.
It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. Jaime and Jonathan are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries. Consider it your weekly companion on the path to better work and a better way of working.
Okay, over the last few weeks, something kind of cool has happened. Jonathan and I, we've started getting messages. We've started getting questions from people who are listening to this show. It's wild. Mostly emails, a couple voice messages. If you want to leave a voice message, check the show notes. What stood out wasn't exactly that people wanted us to go deeper on a specific episode or a topic. They were more like, okay, guys, like now what? Stuff like, okay, but what do you actually do when you bump into this in real life? Or yeah, that sounds right, but it's not really working the way that I thought it would in real life. What should I do with that? Which sort of says that people are trying this stuff out, which I think is really cool. They're not just, nodding along, which is super rad. So we thought we'd try something kind of new. We pulled together about 10 of these questions. We're just going to try to work through as many as we can. I've actually randomized them. I'm going to use a quick little tool here to kind of pull one up at random. So neither Jonathan or I know what's coming. Feels a little risky. Maybe it's kind of fun. We'll see. Certainly don't promise perfect answers, but we do promise honest ones. And if you like this format, or if you've got a question you've been sitting with, there's a link in the show notes. Leave us a note, leave us a message, shoot us an email. We genuinely love hearing from you. And if this works, we'll do more. So with that, Jonathan, it is good to see you, man. Let me see what we get here first. Ooh, yes. Okay. This is from Sam. I think it's Samantha, maybe Sam. Question. You guys have talked about seeing the customer journey instead of just a funnel. What is one change that companies can make immediately to shift from measuring funnels to understanding customer experience? Whoa. Okay, that's hot. That's hot out of the gates.
Okay. I came like right out of the textbook. I feel like.
Funnel to journey. What's something that a company can do immediately to shift from thinking about funnels to thinking about customer journey?
This is the way I'm going to frame this may not be an actual thing, but I'll get around to what I'm talking about here. But in general, one thing I've noticed is when people talk about their overall journey or the overall customer experience through the lens of a funnel, it gets distilled very quickly down to a lot of numbers, KPIs, and a lot of focus around, conversion rates and click-through rates and whatever else might be contributing to some of the numbers. And a lot of it is just looking at where the numbers are moving and where's the good numbers and where's the bad numbers and a lot of this kind of stuff. When people look at their customer experience as a journey, I find that they talk more about the people. They talk more about like, how does somebody think when they're here? Or why did someone do that? Or how do we get people to do this instead of this? Or now that they're here, I feel like they're not finding this. I want them to find this, or they seem to get frustrated here. But it's way more like sentiment driven and looking through the eyes of your customer when you really think about a journey. And you think about a journey for what it really is, right? Like it's this kind of windy road and you make decisions and you kind of keep moving forward, but you twist and turn a little bit. And it's important, I think, to think about it that way, because that's going to help you understand what people are experiencing with what you're putting in front of them versus a big spreadsheet with a whole bunch of numbers in it and being like, wow, I wish column K was bigger than column J. And how do we do that? And a lot of times it can really force people out of the headspace of thinking about like, wait, we're talking about real people who are in real situations or making real decisions and are struggling or with something or being very excited about something, whatever it might be. Those people are on a journey. And as you work through that journey with them, you're going to find the best way to get a good outcome. If you really, really focus on just the funnel of things, I do think you can get so wrapped around the actual digits you're looking at that it's easy to just kind of disconnect yourself from what the person is that's going through that.
That's an excellent way to kick us off here. I think that's critical. Sam, Samantha, I'm sorry, I'll keep doing that. If you're thinking about what you're taking away today back to your team, that whole, where are we starting from? What's our orientation around this puzzle, this question. The worldview, the orientation that the organization tends to have when you start talking about funnels is it's inward. It's talking about what we need, what we want. Our job here as the entity of the company or the team is to take this number here in the lower left and we have to move it to the upper right. That's what we want. The funnel is kind of built to optimize that. So we're looking at all these numbers and we're looking at things that kind of happened. So you're always looking historically and you're looking back inward at yourself. The customer journey forces you to orient yourself around the other, which is difficult to do. I mean, your customer service folks probably live and breathe in that world because they're forced to talk to the customer all day long and respond to what their pain points are and what pressures they're feeling and what's working and what's not and all the friction and all the joy. I mean, that's really the orientation you ought to try adopting in your team or with your group, is to say, hey, we don't need to put together like a chutes and ladders looking map of what our customer's doing, but it's probably worth the cycle just sitting around going, let's make some predictions and let's make some assertions about what we think somebody might be feeling, going through, dealing with, at this moment in their experience with us. Forces you to kind of see the world, through their eyes, that whole kind of intentional empathy piece that we've talked about here before. A really simple thing that I think works, that I've seen, work before, is when you kind of pick a piece of your experience of the overall interaction that your customer's having with you in any given, scenario, and ask what information, what assumptions are we making right here in this moment about the customer? Like, what do we assume the customer knows right here when they're about to do this thing, when they're about to give us their email address, or they're about to click the CTA button on the thing? There's usually assumptions baked in there that the business kind of just assumes the customer has. Those are worth checking. Are we off the ranch with our assumptions? Maybe we haven't thought about it at all. The orientation piece is important, and the ability for the organization to kind of place forward-looking bets and make some predictions based on sitting with that customer, empathetically. That's kind of the difference between a funnel or a journey in my mind, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that lines up. It does help. When you think journey, you think people. They're doing stuff. They're wandering around. They're trying to get to a goal, right? Like the journey usually has some kind of a destination you're trying to get to, and then the closer you get to that, the better it is. A lot of times when we look at a funnel, it's always this acceptable loss that we look at it, right? We're going to lose 17 people in this part of the funnel. We're going to lose 32 people in this part of the funnel, and down to here. The end, when we get right down here where the money button is, I want 6 people to get to here to push this button, and then the business is good. And it really says nothing about how any of those people got there, how happy they were when they finished, or anything. And if you do look at it through the lens of a journey, you are way more likely to apply that empathy and apply some of that thinking there, so that you might even realize, like, yeah, we projected we wanted 6 people to hit the money button at the end, and we did, so we won. But if you understood the journey better, you might be like, that number maybe should have been like 25. Looking at the sentiment of everybody on this journey, we actually lost a whole bunch of people right here because of an issue that we didn't really think of. And yet we kind of just accepted the outcome because our funnel says if 6% conversion rate at the very end of this thing drives revenue where we want it, cool, we have succeeded. And it may not get you the right level of analysis to really understand what's happening there.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because when you lose people, audience, customers, whatever, at sort of different segments of that funnel as you move, as you move down, sometimes there's an assumption that those losses, to your point, what you just said, are acceptable losses. The journey part forces you to kind of, analyze a bit more thoughtfully. Are those acceptable losses? Because having the wrong people leave, that's a great thing. So we're not saying like, oh, you got to go optimize to go get 100% or whatever. No, that's not it at all. But there's certainly insights along the way there where that drop off could be an artifact of you doing such a good job of filtering for the right people that people are self-qualifying really effectively and moving down that funnel even further. And the folks that you would never want to be a part, and you're not gonna be able to help them, they're not for you. That's one of those like, okay, good, that's great, we're doing a great job there. Or it could just be that there are insights that would allow you to tweak those various steps of the journey to change that number so that whatever you end up at the very kind of like the net is even more impactful than you thought. So I guess I'm sort of saying it's not necessarily a bad exercise or anxiety inducing to think about drop off along the way in a funnel. In many cases, that's probably a generous thing. That's probably a good thing that the wrong folks might be opting out of an interaction with you. Just make sure that that's exactly, why you think that's happening, or at least make some assertions as you think that might be, what's happening. And I don't think you can get there easily unless you start mapping out a journey from the customer's point of view, which is very different than saying we're going to go back to our desk and build an optimized funnel to go convert a thing.
Yeah, I'll just maybe put a bow on that by being like, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but if you're in the room talking about customer journeys and you actually have customer service people in your organization and they're not in the room, you're making a mistake. Like, this period. Like, if you're looking at customer journeys, you're trying to optimize customer journeys, you're trying to plan and influence, find the people in your customer service organization that talk to all these people and know, like, what happens when I get to this stage? Yeah, well, most people call and they talk about this or that. Those people are a wealth of information when it comes to your customers. And if you're not talking to your customers or you're not tracking that, and those people exist in your organization, don't make the mistake of treating them just like the frontline folks that, just do the dirty work. Like, these are some of the most knowledgeable people in your organization.
That's such a great point. You and I have been with teams where we've had that conversation. We go around the table of the stakeholders, everyone's got the right head of whatever department and all the right stakeholders. They go, who has that information? Raise your hand if you have the information. Who here owns the voice of the customer? Who has that? And there's sort of like a weird, like, Spider-Man's like meme of like, is that you? Is that you? Who is it you? It's like, oh, maybe we should have some support people here. It probably makes sense to have somebody be the evangelist for the voice of the customer. And I would bet that for many people, there's a department that may not have a chair or a seat at that table. That's definitely worth looking at. All right, I'm gonna keep us moving. Sam, thank you very much. That is very cool. All right, this is from Marcus. Looks like Marcus is from one of the Carolinas. How do you recommend leaders balance urgency with patience when they are trying to change entrenched work habits? How do you balance just moving fast versus moving thoughtfully when you're trying to induce change in your organization? Is that what that is?
Maybe. The way I would interpret this is, as a team member, sometimes you struggle with understanding, like, we don't have 10 priority one things. Like, we can't have 10 priority one things. So we can't jump up and down for urgency for all 10 if we can't prioritize them in the first place. And feeling like a lot of pressure to get stuff done fast, but also knowing that maybe you aren't doing things the most efficient way or running the best processes, or you're still kind of feeling that out. So it can feel like a real struggle of trying to be like, do we take a beat and make sure we have everything ready and we know what we're doing before we all just run as fast as we can? Or do we run as fast as we can and just deal with whatever comes at us, right? And that's frankly, that's the struggle I think most people sit with on a daily basis. There's probably in environments where if you're in any kind of a fast-paced environment, you're usually dealing with the balance of, definition versus execution in some ways, or some version of that, right? Where we're trying to get our plans right before we start to build, but we're already behind building, so go, right? Like, and then we get into this mode. So part of where I would kind of approach this, sometimes we run with a sense of urgency because of some fear that we're not going to make a target or a goal or something like this, and we feel like just go is the only possible way to get ourselves there. And we will just handle whatever comes our way and let's just power through this and try and get there. And yet I think most of us, and usually there's somebody in the room that will start by raising their hand on these things, which is just kind of like, do we really know exactly what we're doing here, or like what we're trying to do? And like, I understand we're all like trying to sprint to this goal, but do we all like even understand what the goal is? Like, we may not know exactly what our path is to get there, but we all need to make sure we understand what we're all trying to do. And sometimes you at least need to hammer out some of the basics of that. The patience part of this comes from like, can we just take a beat? Are we all on the same page? Like, do we all understand what we're trying to do? Do we all understand who owns what, right? So there's an ownership piece. There is a prioritization piece. There's a little bit of a process piece. There's some level setting with the the team and the leaders to be like, do we all understand? Like, we can't just come in and crack a whip and then everybody just scatters and runs as fast as they can wherever direction they think they're supposed to go. First of all, you just can't pull that very frequently anyway. Like, you get to ring that bell maybe once or twice a year where it's just all hands on deck. Let's all go really fast. I'll tell you why later. Like, sometimes we have to deal with that. But if you're really approaching something with any kind of purpose whatsoever, as a leader or as a member of a team whose leader is kind of exhibiting this, I think sometimes it's if the team is not aligned and they do not understand where they're all trying to get to right now and everything's kind of up in the air, running as fast as possible is usually not the path to success. Usually that means that you end up having to hit the reset button somewhere, and now you're starting over, and you're even way more behind than you were before. So I guess where I pull that back is like, one, some of this needs to be, let's get on the same page. Let's understand what we're trying to do. And let's make sure everybody's on the same page. We understand who owns what, because yeah, there's maybe some uncertainty here, but uncertainty can't be the destination. Like, where are we going? That can't be the uncertain thing. The uncertain thing might be, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do part A, B, and C, but I know we need to do part A, B, and C. So we're all going to go try and get that done. And we all understand what getting A, B, and C means. In that case, urgency can play a role, because now it's like, all right, guys, we have 70% of the understood definition, scope, and process that we need here, but we do know that we've got a milestone that we need to hit with a timeline or a budget or something. So we need to run fast. And that means everybody's got to raise their hand quick when they bump into stuff and everything else, but we all can agree that we know what A, B, and C is. We know what the goal is. We're all set. Everybody good? All right, let's go as fast as we can. Let's over communicate when we run into stuff. Go. So that's the patience and urgency kind of combination, because you took a beat to make sure you were ready. It's the fire the gun and then decide like what target we're shooting at is really hard. And yet a lot of companies do that all the time. And that's when it feels like you're running at 100% urgency and 0% patience. And that's just a fast track to burning out.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think my reaction, because I'm in agreement with pretty much most of what you said, and you kind of had my brain trip down a few paths that I'll try to get to. But reading the question back while you were talking, how do leaders balance urgency with patience when trying to, I think maybe even upstream of your insights is like, boy, what a thoughtful question. I mean, the fact that you would even ask that question, I would say step one is like somebody in your organization has to ask that question. Somebody has to say that out loud and go, hey, I think this is the thing, y'all. Like, we should probably raise this. Like, there's first and foremost is you have to see it. You have to mark it in the first place that there even is this interplay between activity and urgency and effort and foundational bits that have to do with where are we going? Why are we going that way? What are our aspirations? Who are we here to serve? All that kind of foundational strategic stuff. So there's that interplay, that balance between strategy and tactics, between being mindful of, let's not mistake the empty calories of activity for, productive effort and all that sort of like stuff. But, the question, how do leaders do it and balance it? Well, step one is they see it. Step one is you mark that it's even a thing in the first place. So I think wherever you are in the food chain of the organization, being the person that's like, hey, I'm thinking like this, I think about things like this, is super valuable. And raising that with somebody you trust in the organization to try to expand that conversation in general, thoughtfully, is a pretty good use of time. The other piece of it, and this is where my head went as you were talking. So it's old. I think it's Donald Saul. So if I get it wrong, sorry, Donald Saul, but he wrote an article in the HBR back in like 2010 or 11 called Why Good Companies Go Bad. And it was sort of the foundational piece of writing at that time for what he called active inertia. That was that whole thing of, man, the Circuit Cities of the world, the Firestone Tires of the world, the Kodaks of the world, they didn't get disrupted because they were dumb, because they were sitting around the Blockbusters. They weren't like going, oh man, I don't know they didn't get, the disruption did not impact them because they were foolish or they were flat-footed or they were sitting around drinking champagne, eating bonbons all day. It was, in fact, in his argument, an artifact of them being really busy on all the wrong things, because it gets really difficult to stop and reconsider and reevaluate your core strategic infrastructure, the roots of like, who are we? Who do we serve? What business are we really in? Once you're really in motion. I mean, Blockbuster Video is a fascinating one, right? I mean, you and I spend a lot of time in media related conversations. So Blockbuster and Netflix, I mean, those examples get trotted out all the time in conversations that we have. I mean, you could make a reasonable argument that at the time that Netflix appeared into the world, Blockbuster perceived itself as being in the business of collecting late fees. I mean, so it wasn't like Blockbuster couldn't have sat around and said, hey, maybe we should start using the U.S. Postal Service as the distribution engine for getting, the movies that people come to our building for, in fact, showing up at their house. They could have done that. That wasn't like they didn't have the mental, fortitude to think of ideas like that. But I'm sure there was an enormous cohort sitting around the table going, well, here's this big pot of revenue generated from the late fees. I think it was like $700 or $800 million a year or something just in late fees at the time. I could be totally wrong on that. But my point is, they were at a point where all of their activity was serving a particular definition of who they were in the world and serving the needs of the business at that moment in time. And I'm sure loads of activity and urgent things happened, and people were going to work every day, taking all the right meetings and sending all the right emails and having all the right calls. But perhaps it was not easy to find or carve out the opportunities to have discussions about what are the more thoughtful, strategic things we should be thinking about, talking about, and socializing in our organization. So if a leader's trying to balance those two things, yeah, I guess that's my kind of 2 cents on top of that is, step one, great for even asking the question. Ask that of your team and amongst people that you trust, wherever that you are. And 2, yeah, I mean, just be really mindful of not mistaking the empty calories of just being busy for stuff that's actually, productive. Like if you and I right now on the phone, Jonathan, pulled like 4 or 5, 10 of our friends onto this line and said, hey guys, I want everybody to right now, as soon as we get off the phone, drive to Cleveland. Go drive to Cleveland and go make it happen. The chances of all of us choosing the exact same way to get to Cleveland are probably near zero. What roads are we going to take? What car are we going to take? How fast are we going to go? Are we going to drive all day? Are we going to stop all night? I mean, I'm just saying the underlying, why are we trying to get there? What are we trying to solve? Like what's happening here? It makes it really difficult to accomplish things that might require a lot of real effort and activity and should be urgent in some cases, but it makes those things harder if you haven't really laid that foundation of purpose and who's it for and what's it for and all that sort of stuff before you get going. So it's hard to be urgent if you haven't been patient.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think the net is urgency without a plan is just chaos. Urgency with no plan is just everybody running around as fast as possible doing who knows what, right? Like to maybe one step further on your analogy, right? If it's like we had a couple people come out of the house and we're like, I just got these instructions. We need to get a mile from here as fast as possible. And you just take off running, right? Like, okay, I'm on it, go. And they're like, whoa, wait, nope. We actually have to go to this very specific place that's a mile from here. I didn't have all that. Oh, Jamie's already gone. Okay, let's get somebody else. We need to go over here. This place, we got to pick up this package. It's a mile from here. Here's exactly the directions. Get there as fast as you can and get back here. That person's gone back, got what they're supposed to be, and we still don't know what happened to you, right? You're like, Jamie was a mile from here somewhere, and he got there presumably pretty quick, but that was not at all was necessary to accomplish the mission here, right? Because it was urgent, but there was no plan. And to have a plan, you got to have some patience. Once you have a plan, you can approach it with urgency, I think.
It made me just think of the visual, not necessarily like a Rube Goldberg machine, although that's kind of cool. But those people who lay like a bazillion dominoes on the ground, they do those crazy domino rally. That takes an enormous amount of patience to lay. I guess unless you're the like Mark Rober with some machine that drops them all out or something like that. But the act of laying all those dominoes out to do this crazy cool thing takes a long time. That takes patience. And then when you tip one and it all just sort of flows and they knock down, one after the other, just in this beautiful, cool pattern, that goes pretty fast, but it's pretty cool. And clearly there was a plan. Marcus, I have no idea if that helps, but that's a really good question, man. I really appreciate that. So this one did not have a name on this one, but San Jose was listed. So San Jose, question is, you guys often discuss trust and accountability. What's a common mistake leaders make when trying to rebuild trust that actually backfires? What's a mistake that leaders make?
I know we've said before on different shows and stuff, is that trust is earned, right? Trust is something you have to earn. And you have to make some deposits ahead of time to earn that trust, right? You cannot demand trust. You can't, set the expectation that everyone just has to trust everybody. You can start with that as a premise, but you still have to earn it. And I do think when it goes bad, like when trying to rebuild trust in an environment where maybe there's a lack of trust that's just across the organization. It could be from bad leadership. It could be some bad team members. It could be bad policies, whatever it was. There's things that cause the culture to kind of break down a little bit. Everybody's losing trust a little bit. It's time to rebuild that. One, that's tough, right? Like if you're in an organization that's lacking trust and it's kind of breaking down, that tends to lead to a lot of, where you're getting to work and you just don't feel great, right? Like that's not a good thing. That tends to be toxic. There's a lot of things that go wrong there. So when it comes time to rebuild it, part of it, frankly, often starts with you may have to remove some folks from the organization to rebuild some of that trust. because there's some acknowledgement that there's breakdowns in everything that we're doing. And it might be because of a handful of individuals that are just in the wrong position, or they're at the wrong place in their career, or they just are not the right fit, or whatever else it might be. And that can build trust with the rest of the organization. You're starting to earn trust. You're saying, I've identified that we've got problems in our organization. We've tried to make some corrections here. It's not working out. They've had to leave the organization. While that can sometimes be a really difficult step, I've found time and time again that it's one of the fastest ways to start earning some trust, is people saying like, oh, I identified those couple individuals a long time ago as being kind of a problem, and they were, breaking our culture down. And I was starting to lose trust in everybody else for not noticing that. Right. And then once action gets taken, which sometimes it takes a while to get that stuff, handled, because you don't want to make the wrong decisions at the wrong times. But when you finally take action, a lot of times what you get is the rest of the organization kind of perks up and be like, wow, like the 3 bad apples in our organization all got sent home today. And I don't have fear for my job because I realize what just happened. So in addition to that, or maybe as part of that process is again, listening. What is it that's difficult for people, right? Like if your culture's struggling right now and there's a lack of trust across the organization, locate the people that you trust and that trust you, and have some open conversations. Like, what are you hearing? What's going on? Like, how can we fix this? What can we do to make this better? Is there a lack of clarity in the vision? Is there, a lack of, sentiment around the leadership team of giving us the right directions, or whatever else it might be, is starting to find some proof points. Earn trust by removing things in the organization that are contributing to some breakdown of your culture and trust. Remove that. Listen to what people are saying. Find low-hanging fruit. Says, oh, everyone hates to use the whiz-bang platform that we thought was really great, and turns out it's just making everyone's life miserable. We might need to rethink that and acknowledge it to the group. Hey, we heard these are like the top 4 things that everybody's really struggling with, and this is our plan to address those things. That earns you some currency real quick on the trust side. Okay, someone heard me. There's a plan to go address these things. Seems reasonable. Yeah, it may not happen today or tomorrow, but I feel like there's reason for me to double down on my investment here, because people are listening, people are taking action. I believe that there's an opportunity to rebuild some trust and culture here. So cool, I'm in. But those things, you got to be real careful, because they cannot be hollow, right? One, you cannot just declare that we're all going to trust each other. I've seen that happen. It's wild. Like, I don't know how any person could sit down in a room full of people and say, we all now trust each other. This is how it is, right? Like, that's crazy. And hopefully that's not going on in your organization, in San Jose, wherever you may be. And outside of that, I think it's acknowledging how you earn trust, and being credible and transparent and honest and attentive, and starting to show that the things I said are the things we're doing, and that everybody's kind of aligned with that as a goal. And the trust starts getting earned, and the repair starts to happen. Oftentimes it doesn't happen super quick. Like, this is sometimes can be a really long process if there's a breakdown in trust in an organization. And if it's at the highest levels, it can be even harder, because you might have just a fundamental misalignment with how you view trustworthy organizations and what they value. Sometimes you have to look inward a little bit and be like, am I at an organization that doesn't value these things that I value? And if it's at the highest level, do I have any reason to believe it's ever going to change? Like, this is the ethos of this organization, maybe. And that might be part of it, is acknowledging that is the situation. Now, if you have a leader in your organization, or like the quote unquote leader of your organization exhibits traits that show that they really care about this, and that they're starting to listen and do some of these things, then there might be good reason to believe that, like, okay, they get it. Like, they're doing the things that they're supposed to do. I'm on for the ride. I like my job. I like the opportunities here. And I realize leadership maybe didn't catch this as fast as I would have liked, but I'm seeing the signals that indicate that they care about it. They value it. They value the people's opinions who are struggling with it. And they're starting to put plans in place to address it. And those things are starting to work. The trust curve starts bending back up, and those deposits start to feel pretty rich at that point.
This is one of those areas where it's very difficult for my brain to separate the professional use case from the personal use case. Because if you're just asking, how do you rebuild trust after it's been broken? I mean, good Lord. Like, I don't know a single person who isn't trying to navigate that just in their own personal life, whether that's through a spouse, a partner, their children, their parents, their relatives. I mean, so it's tough for me to separate those two things out totally, but I can very easily tell you one of, in my opinion, you ask about common mistakes, San Jose. A very easy one for me, And I realize the irony, because here we are on a podcast talking about it, is talking too much. Like, I am guilty of that all the time. Like, what's something to avoid? A common mistake that leaders trying to rebuild trust, or anybody, is talking too much. I'm not saying communication doesn't matter. It totally does. But trust is not rebuilt through explaining why you should be trusted, right? It comes back through a sense of predictability. The backfire move is over-explaining to people who, on your team or in your organization, you should probably assume are intellectually capable of understanding the dynamics of whatever the situation is at that moment. So the backfire move is over-explaining what happened instead of changing what happens next. What a lot of people are probably carrying around, if they are questioning or feeling like trust is not there, is they're carrying around this anxiety of, well, this thing that I really did not like or I did not want to have happen, is it going to happen again? Like, their ability to predict safety and security is super important. So how do you do that? I mean, the only thing you can do is you've got to make fewer promises, but they have to be realistic as well. You got to look for achievable, small, reasonable commitments, because it's going to take consistency. It's going to take being able to show up consistently over time and demonstrate by your ability to deliver on a promise. That could be literally perhaps a verbal promise, or it is the unspoken subtext of the promise or the commitment you are making to a person, a team, an organization, that you are delivering against consistently over time, which means you have to go back and reflect and go, based on my composition and my abilities to do a thing in the world, what are the promises I can keep? What are the realistic goals given my skill sets and my attributes and what resources I have in this moment in time and the hours of the day and blah, blah, blah. What are reasonable, realistic goals and behaviors and patterns that I can start to bring to light and make visible publicly consistently over time? Because that's the only way it gets better. And yeah, I mean, I'm always mindful of the talking too much, because I talk too much. So,
Well, I mean, maybe I'll end this by saying this too, is just as a reminder, right? Earning anything is usually hard work. Earning trust is no different.
Yeah, that's well said. And anyone that's promising a shortcut to anything like that is, I mean, there's just no way. No way, San Jose. Oh, did you see what I did there? You see what I did there? Wow. That came to me in a moment. Oh, I can feel the eye rolls on the other end. They're like, oh, good Lord. All right, let's see what else I got on the wheel here. This is, okay, this one, no name, no location. So to anyone, anywhere in the world, in your conversations about doing better work, how would you guys define mental health or psychological safety? And what's the first step in building it in a team? Hi-yi-yi. Yeah, conversations about better work. How would you define mental health and psychological safety? What's the first step to building it in a team?
Let me take a quick crack at this. Obviously, this is a broad one, right? So, I mean, we could probably talk forever on this, and we could probably still get it wrong. I mean, psychological safety is a kind of an explosive phrase on its own, because, boy, that could mean a lot of stuff. So I'm going to try and dial it back.
Yeah, I need a different word.
Yeah, I'm going to try and dial back a little bit to just maybe some of our own, just like mental health stuff, right? Like where, we've talked about, things that, can fatigue us, things that can kind of wear us down, things that can burn us out, things that are frustrating. And a lot of that can lead to, certainly mental health challenges, right? The one thing for me as a leader that I've been way more dialed into over the last, I don't know, several years, I suppose. I mean, I've always tried to be, attentive to this, but maybe more so lately. And some of this came out of like some of the remote work and working from home that has kind of taken place over the last 5 or 6 years. And some of this just comes down to knowing that it's okay to take breaks. I really appreciate when someone on the team comes to me and says, I've been running really hard lately, and frankly, I haven't been sleeping well this week. Or I'm going to take a personal day on Friday and just try and like recharge the batteries or whatever. Like those kinds of things were not super common, even really 5, 10, 20 years ago, whatever, however far back you want to go, like wherever your work experience lies, is like the personal day to just recharge the batteries is pretty new. Like that you don't get a lot of people like that. Wasn't a real common thing 10 or 15 years ago. And while, no, we don't want to kind of like advocate to be like, hey, make sure you take every day you need off to recharge the batteries if it's no matter what. Like at some point your commitment still has to be there. But this idea that you just have to just push yourself and push yourself and push yourself and deal with everything that comes at you and just kind of keep battling and persevering and like strong and resilient and, like delivering constantly and all of these things it can be really tough. And even if you kind of fancy yourself as somebody who can really take on these kinds of challenges and do all this stuff, it's like, no matter who you are, you have to place some value on your own just mental well-being, right? Like that has to be part of the equation, because even if you feel like you kind of deflect a lot of things, you could compartmentalize and do all this stuff that, the various tricks to help reduce the stress and anxiety and all these other things. In my experience, it's always there. It's somewhere. And the longer you let it go unattended, the more disruptive the outcome of that is, right? However that manifests itself. If you let it go too long, just like anything, that festering or whatever that might be tends to be a very disruptive outcome for yourself, for your team, for your organization, whatever. So while this is a pretty heady topic from the way it was phrased, I do think that having a culture in your team and as a leadership, group or whatever else it might be, is understanding like, if we're in a high stress environment and everybody's running hard and I get a lot of strong performers and all these other things, I cannot take that for granted. I have to find ways to give these folks breaks, even if they're not demanding it themselves, because then the other side of that coin is you have to find a way as an individual to make that time. Like you have to find a way to take those breaks for yourself. If your leadership team is not pushing it on you, to be aware of it, to be of your own well-being, is that, better work, I think, does have a component of this is I need to show up and I need to feel motivated. I need to have some passion. I need to go home with some level of accomplishment. Like these things have to happen with some kind of regularity, because if I dread going to work and I feel like I didn't get anything productive done at the end of the day, and I just got to go right back at it tomorrow, except I've got to double down because I feel like I'm falling behind. Eventually, there's no formula for better work in that kind of a model, right? Like we look at it from, there's processes and there's things to look out for, and there's certain types of people and performers and leaders and all these other things. But when you really boil down to mental health, like it does have to be something that's valued in your organization and that you value yourself, so that you don't over push when it comes time to being like, I'm always running at 120%. At some point, that's not going to work, right? That's just how it goes. And so I do like the idea of, if we wrap all the things kind of we've talked about on this show, over the last, several months or whatever it might be, is that there's always a component to kind of just like good mental health awareness and care that needs to come from both sides. And if you're not finding the organization values that at all, like this is an area where as a leader, you have to pay attention to these things, right? Like this becomes part of being a leader, is understanding the people you lead and knowing where some of their limits and breakpoints might be and where they might be running a little close to the edge, and kind of imposing opportunities for people to just step back and recover a little bit. Not always just waiting for someone to raise their hand and say, hey, I need a day, because not everybody's going to do that. And if you're not doing your part of that, then it's probably not happening.
Yeah, it was helpful for me to be able to sit with the question while you were talking, so I could sort of walk myself into a more comfortable space, because I think I kind of just forgot that in the context of the question, this individual said to make work better. So with the frame of work, let's say, being kind of put around this concept, this is a conversation about culture. I mean, that's it from my point of view, and I love how you were describing it just there, because it just makes me think about the resources you have at your disposal on a team or as a part of an organization, or maybe it's just yourself. If you're, a solo person running hard to try to do a thing, a builder party of one trying to bring your work or your art or your ideas into the world, is your natural resources. If that's like crude oil, like in the ground, and you're fortunate enough to have a supply of crude oil to go do your thing, you still need a refinement layer. Like you still need a refinery to transform that raw resource into the fuel that you can put in the engine to go run and go do your thing. That's why I love conversations about culture, because it's fun to kind of, I think, help people move out of this trap of, oh, culture is like the soft, fuzzy, everybody should like have a teddy bear and a therapy dog, and we're all just, soft around the edges, and we hug trees and save the whales and all this stuff, which people want to somehow, I guess, use to diminish its value or to maybe dismiss the topic because it's got too many round edges for them or something. I love the conversation where you can move people out of that headspace and go, no, we're talking about investing in these pieces because it is the refinery layer for the resources you have to help drive output. If you expect to be able to do great things, this is an absolute essential. So if the concept of psychological safety, there, I said it, it's not so scary. We'll say, if what we're really saying is like, you're asking people to not have to like run the math in their head before they speak in your organization for fear of being struck down or whatever, what do people say when you're the dissenter around the table in a meeting? Those are culture, components. Those are things worth thinking about and investing in, because you don't want people on your team, especially if they are being asked to deliver at max value with max capacity and be heroes and do heroic work. If they're saying, well, if I say this or I do this, like what's going to happen to me later? Like what's this going to cost? Ooh, how am I going to come out behind? That's a bad thing. Like, I think leaders accidentally kill things that help culture and this sense of safety by oftentimes, I think, saying the right thing, but then acting the wrong way afterwards. So there's like that disconnect between the speech you heard at the all hands and then, to your point, kind of like the behaviors that those, especially the ones that happen to be in senior leadership positions, that they demonstrate. If those two things are not aligned, outside of the whole trust thing, the question before, that's also a signal for someone to be like, ooh, I don't feel so great maybe about raising my hand and being a dissenter or lobbing my idea out there. This culture does not seem to be accommodating for the types of feelings, emotions, ideas, and decisions I'm interested in making as a part of this team or organization.
Yeah, dude, I think you nailed it there. And I think it's, again, helpful for me to hear you kind of talk through that too, because I think there is that component, right, of being like, hey, if we're all going to try and make things better here, that means there has to be agents of change around the organization. And how safe do you feel as a member of this organization to be an agent of change when you're trying to achieve better work? Because yeah, there might be some consequences there, right? Depending on the organization, the culture, the trust, the things we were just talking about, is that guaranteeing like that if you feel like you want to be an agent of change inside your organization, great. But there, I can understand where someone might feel like, if I'm the first one to poke my head up, am I just the first one to get my head chopped off, right? Like that, I don't want to be that guy, or that person in the organization. And so it does come down, culture, I think, is the drum that you're beating on this, right? Which is that, if the culture is completely disjointed and the culture is, attack the people who are trying to be agents of change, that's tough. It's very tough. And again, it goes back up to being, if there's trustworthy leadership in the organization, you kind of need to start there. And one, just raise the concern of being like, hey, I feel like we're kind of an organization of people who say, hey, we want to see, we want to change, we want to be better. And every time somebody raises their hand, it gets chopped off. And it just doesn't feel like that's really what you want. To your point, you're saying the right thing, but then the actions don't really align with that. And so, yeah, I can appreciate that, because I could see there's probably a lot of people out there who are feeling like, I would like to be an agent of change. There's a certain amount of fear I have in trying to do that in my organization. And so maybe I don't. And that's where, if you can't find a leader who you can trust to have some conversations like that, again, you might be in an organization where leadership has a cultural problem that they're not trying to solve.
That just made me think of almost the inverse as a tactic. If you want to try something today. Here's the takeaway. If you want to try to build a sense of safety and security quickly, and you are fortunate enough to be in a leadership position, or you are the one kind of shaping, or you're trying to shape culture, publicly thank someone or demonstrate appreciation for raising and surfacing something really uncomfortable. I mean, that right there teaches a whole bunch of people in the room how we do things around here. So that person that brings up, and it can be large or small, I hate the ice machine, or it's something far more substantive. But the way leadership responds to uncomfortable information, topics, themes, and ideas that are surfaced says a lot about their tolerance level for people, assuming those things are reasonable. and within the scope. But as a leader, that's a great way. That's a great way to kind of purposely pluck one of those out and thank them publicly and have a conversation about that publicly. That would go a long way, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out. It's something that I know we try to lean into this on every topic we can, which is there's always multiple sides, right? There's the lens the leaders are looking through, there's the lens the team members are looking through, and there's other lenses, of course, that we talk about as well. But there's always an opportunity, if on the leadership side, yes, to your point, if you're going to say, we're going to make improvements, we're going to make changes, you have to welcome the criticism as long as it's professional, right? And then call attention to it, reward that behavior. Like that's what you want. Yeah, it was uncomfortable. Yeah, that's a question that's tough. I don't want to have to stand here in front of a whole bunch of people and answer this question, but I'm going to, and I'm going to be grateful for the person that had the guts to raise their hand in the first place, because it's going to signal to everyone else that that's okay. And on the other hand, the person who raised it, good for them. And as that member of your team, yeah, it can be a little scary sometimes, but determining that you can be an agent of change in your organization and it's worth putting your hand up in that moment, yeah, it's a risk. And you might, depending on your organization, that might feel more risky than others. But, finding a leader that might sponsor you and trying to like get into position where you can kind of put that hand up with confidence, I think it's great.
We've said it before in other episodes. Don't just hang the poster on the wall in the break room. Don't just what are those? X number of days since a workplace accident. There you go. That's how safe we are.
That's right. We can't just hang a sign that says psychological safety. Welcome here.
We have achieved it. It is here. You're all welcome. Moving down the list, let's press the button. And okay. So this is from Priya, from Austin, Texas. Hey, look at that. We got name and place. Hey, Priya, what practical strategies have you guys seen work best for cross-functional collaboration? I work frequently with cross-functional teams, but I often see teams frustrated with handoffs. So we're talking about how do you reduce frustration when you are dealing with cross-functional teams, when you're collaborating and you are handing stuff off. Frustrating handoffs. That sounds like an accountability thing. Is what I think that is.
There's some things here, right? Like one, if you're in a cross-functional team inside your organization and you're doing handoffs, even that can be a symptom, right? Where you're just throwing things over the fence to the next group over and over and over again. That happens a lot still, frankly. Super, 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 super common is that we're just throwing things over the fence when we're done with them. And the other team, it's now their hot potato, their grenade, whatever analogy you want to use. It's their problem. In my career and in the organizations I've been in, now sometimes it depends on how big your teams are. When you're talking about cross-functional teams and some of the stuff like this, there's organizations where this could be hundreds or more people that are all involved in this stuff, right? Like so. And spread across different geographies. And so the complexity of a problem like this can really vary. However, some of the best ways to kind of address some of the friction of working inside, cross-functional teams and organizations, find the people in the different, silos or the different groups or teams or whatever it might be. If it's marketing, engineering, and sales that are all having to work together, let's say, on a project. There's going to be people on the marketing team that do better talking to engineers. And there's going to be teams on the people on the engineering team that do better talking with sales. And there's going to be people on the sales team that do better talking to marketing. There's always going to be some folks who either have some experience in those lanes, or maybe their inclination leans in some of those directions. They've got a little bit more empathy for what it takes to do those roles, whatever it might be. That helps a lot. I cannot overemphasize that. Now, not everybody has the luxury of this, right? But I've seen so many times where if you just change the communication path and you change some of the responsibilities of the team of who owns what, that you can smooth a lot of that stuff out. One, you encourage the communication in the first place, right? So that there's not just silos and throwing things over the fence. It's going to result in a ton of finger pointing, a ton of blame. There's going to be a lot of misunderstandings. Like all of these things are going to come up, friction everywhere. But if you have some understanding of what it takes to do that job on someone in your team, and you were talking about it. All right, we're getting ready to do the delivery between marketing and engineering. Let's all get ready for that. This isn't a throw it over the fence when marketing's done with it. This is, we got to start involving the engineering team. They need to understand what we're doing. We got to have people who understand engineering to be able to help our team prepare for like, this is what's going to be hard for these guys. We can't do this to them, right? We got to make sure we're preparing this transition way more than like a handoff, right? This is like a crossfade, not like a handoff, right? Like you're ramping one group up while the other group's kind of ramping down. If you're truly doing a handoff, it happens as a merge, right? This isn't a light switch. This isn't a marketing's done, engineering go. You cannot do that. You really, really need to focus on what does that mean to like ramp up this transition that's about to happen. And that means there's a moment where marketing engineering are collaborating. Now it could be an engineering lead and a marketing lead and the rest of the team's like coming on board to move stuff forward. But there has to be an understanding. There has to be that earned trust. There has to be this like, let me explain what we're doing, and we need to understand what you're doing because I want to make this as easy as possible so that you guys don't, go talk to the CEO 6 weeks from now and blame marketing for just throwing you an unprepared blob of scope that you couldn't deal with or whatever. And so working as a team, even if it means some connective tissue between the groups that are just like the folks that tend to get along better or understand each other better, and making sure that they're not just doing these hard exchanges every several weeks or months or whatever it may be, that these are transitional periods where the next group that's getting the baton is getting a chance to ramp up with the team that's handing it off so that as that transition happens, everybody knows what's about to happen. This isn't just like, oh my God, somebody threw the baton in the air, somebody go catch it and start running in the other direction, right? Like these are planned transitions that need to be executed that way with a level of understanding and kind of empathy of what's happening in those moments when you're moving things through. Because more often than not, when I've seen this go sideways, it's because you have multiple groups trying to work together, in air quotes, which basically just says, on February 3rd, this group is going to give us the baton, and now it's our problem for the next 8 weeks before we hand it to the next group, and that's going to be their grenade to carry for a while, and oftentimes that ends up being QA. It's just to put a fine bow on it. But if there's one group that always gets the grenade right before it explodes, it's those guys. And I really apologize to any QA group I've ever done that to in my life. It was never my intention. But yes, communication, transparency, a little bit of empathy, some earned trust. Build those transitions into place so that you're not just throwing somebody a hot potato and running away from it. You're trying to ensure the success of the next person who has to carry the water from you.
I love just the use of language so often in these examples, especially when they are about business or work related things. Cross-functional handoffs. I mean, it reminds me of like George Carlin used to have this great bit where he was talking about, does words evolve over time, right? Like the troops came back from World War I, right? And what did they suffer from? Shell shock. 2 words. 2 syllables, shell shock. You can hear the bombs going off. And then, fast forward and now, it went from shell shock to battle fatigue to, a few more syllables to, obviously now we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, very real things. What we do with language, I find fascinating. Cross-functional handoff. We're just talking about being on a team. We're talking about trying to work on a project where we share resources. We all have unique capabilities and skills that we bring to a project, to a thing we're trying to do. And we got to figure out how to collaborate and work together. Part of it for me is like, let's clear the smoke out of the room with the words. It's kind of fun to say, I guess. It's on the resume, right? Like I work on a cross-functional team or whatever. Okay, you have a role to play in a project where you get to interact with lots of other teams to do your thing. What you're talking about, what you just said, oh my gosh, 100%. We're talking about bringing some intentional empathy to the table with the other folks that you work with on the team, bringing some accountability to the table, your ability to say, hey, I got this. I have some skin in the game. I have a vested interest for a variety of reasons in helping us see this thing to the finish line. I'm just really comfortable going, hey, I own this. And if something breaks at 2 a.m., I know who's the one to call. It's either going to be me or it's going to be this one. There's sort of that ownership piece, getting comfortable with ownership. But also it makes me think of when I worked in a radio station. This was a country station in the Northeast. One of the most fun few weeks out of the year is our general manager would make all the sales guys. And at this time, I was in the sales pit. It was the sales guys and the programming people had to switch jobs. They would have midday shifts and kind of undesirable off-peak hours manned by the sales team. And then the programming folks had to, kind of call on clients or go in and visit. And it was sort of like the local community was aware of it. It was a fun kind of thing. But oh my God, what a great way to accelerate empathy on both sides. And what was great is you saw the output of a salesperson who understood how empathizing with what the programming people were trying to do over the air helped them to be a better salesperson. They understood how the thing they were pitching, whether it was just the spots or something we were going to do online or some live event or some remote, if they better understood what would make the programming team lean in and go, oh yeah, I got that. I can run with that. Oh, that's good. And they were open to kind of, oh, have we thought about this or whatever? Then they could go be more effective in their sales calls and ultimately closing business and then bringing that business into the station and going, hey guys, I felt really good about how we were kind of packaging this up to really be a best fit in a programming lane so that we can do the following things on air, right? We get these types of mentions. You're talking about it this way with a testimonial. It feels natural to this. There was this handoff of the sales into suddenly had to be executed and fulfilled over the air. But that handoff was your crossfade analogy is perfect. It was a beautiful crossfade of both sides being able to lean a little bit into the other world during that transition so that things were shepherded in a direction that was healthy and positive and ultimately got us the outcomes that we were looking for.
I think that's it, right? And so I'm sorry, who was our question from?
This is Priya in Austin, Texas.
Whether Priya has a difficult time, in the organization, and Priya, if you're out there, maybe you could share what the thing is maybe that you're working on. That might be interesting too. But there's a lot of people who go to work every day and feel like I'm in a big team with a bunch of different groups of people, and we just throw things over the fence to each other, and it's really frustrating and difficult. Super common, right? That happens all the time. And there are ways, and you'll see a lot of times when you look in your organization, if that's kind of endemic to your organization, those kinds of things where things are going with the teams, that's a lot of times where you'll see where your superstars start to shine, right? You'll be like, somebody's making this work. It's kind of set up wrong, and there's all these different groups that are throwing things over to the fence, and yet there's like one or two people that instead of throwing something over the fence, they walk it around. They climb over the fence, they head into the other person's territory, and they're like, hey, I want to make sure you get this and you understand what we're giving you, so that everybody knows what to do with it. If you have questions, let me know. And all of a sudden you start to see those people doing that, right? And that's really the cure to this. The cure to this is not the hard transitions, right? It's the crossfade, it's the whatever. But it's an opportunity to really see or be one of these folks, which is like, okay, Priya, if everyone in your team is throwing the thing over the fence every few weeks and then the next group just has the grenade and it's their time to go get it, be one of the people who just climbs over the fence and is part of that team for a minute while that handoff is taking place. Help them understand what it took to get there and what your expectation is of what they're going to do with it from now on. That's a catalyst for like just changing behavior in general, because now the other group wants to be involved. They're like, hey, last time you climbed over the fence and brought the thing over to us instead of just throwing it over, that worked really well. I know you're about to throw something else over. We're going to come over there and just be ready as you're finishing it up so we can take it over the fence. We'll just take it back, right? Because we'll know what's going on. And that stuff just starts happening then, right? Because the teams start to solve these problems. You definitely do not need to wait for some leader to solve this problem. If you're in a group and this is how it's going, yeah, I mean, it's always good to let leadership know, like, hey, this doesn't really, like, our processes aren't working great. Like, our teams are all fractured, or, there's a lot of friction here, whatever. Sure. But then go start fixing it, because this is a very addressable problem where it just leans down to a little bit of communication and empathy, earning some trust, and now all of a sudden everyone's kind of proactively working with each other. The thing's not going over the fence anymore. There's just people going back and forth into each group, intermingling with each other and understanding each other and just getting the job done.
Well said, man. I am looking at the clock. I'm looking at what kind of time I know you have and I have. I think that's the show right there. I think we're talking about a part one and a part two at this point. We're about halfway through this stack of questions. We're going to come back and finish it up. We're going to do this. We'll chop it up. So, look forward to, I guess, episode 2 of the rest of these questions. This has been very fun. I hope we haven't derailed everybody's career or their livelihood as they've brought these questions to the table. But thank you for listening, guys. As always, we appreciate you being on the other end. Please, please, please check the show notes. There's a link for you to leave us a question if any of this sounds like something you'd be interested in doing, or you got questions that you think we might be able to help with, or you'd be interested in wanting us to riff on more. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Jamie.
I'm Jonathan.
This is Slackers. Thank you for being here. We'll talk to you soon.